Okay, students, welcome to another day in the foods classroom. Today we're going to be talking about maybe one of my favorite all-time dinners. I love fajitas. While we do this particular recipe, we're also going to learn about two words. One is marinade and one is saute. What does it look like and what does it mean? Previous to my cooking right now, I have washed my hands for 20 seconds. I have read through my recipe. It makes complete sense. I have then gone ahead and assembled all of my ingredients, as well as pulling out all of the different pieces of equipment that I'm going to need. Everything's at my fingertips. It's going to save me time. It's going to save me energy to do a little bit of prep work before I begin. So looking at this recipe, the first thing that it says up here on the very top of my recipe is that I need to marinate my chicken for at least 4 hours, but no longer than 24 hours. I can always buy pre-made marinades, but to be honest with you, they're pretty expensive as compared to just doing them on your own and assembling your own spices and such. Down at the bottom of this recipe, I've given you what that marinade is at. It's a classic, wonderful combination of herbs and spices, and is great to have at your fingertips. You can make these fajitas either be chicken, which we're going to do here in class, or you can also do them steak if you would prefer beef. Either one is just fine. Traditionally, fajitas are not made in a frying pan, but are cooked out on a grill, after which the meat has been is brought in and cut. But we're going to kind of do it backwards because we don't have a grill here at school for everybody. So I've gone ahead and marinated my chicken in a marinade. So it's sitting right here, and it's been marinating for about 6 hours, to be honest with you. And it's already to go. The word marinate means to let it sit, let a food, it could be a vegetable, it could be a meat like this, to sit in some herbs and spices so that, number one, some of that seasoning is absorbed into the meat itself. And the second thing is, in the case of meats, it's going to help make our meats be more tender. Some cuts of meat are more tough than others, and whenever you see a marinade doing or adding in with meat, you can assume that it's going to help make that meat more tender and juicy. The thing that makes the meat tender is some sort of an acid. And when you look down here in the recipe, it says that there's a 1/4 cup of red wine vinegar. That is what's going to make the meat become more tender. Now, lest you worry that I'm giving you an alcoholic beverage, this is not. It's just made out of red grapes. It's got a vinegar that's got some red grapes in it, which they call red wine vinegar. All right, so the word marinate means to sit in a seasoned concoction for a period of time so the food will absorb flavor, and it will also be more tender in the case of meats. All right, the first thing, and I'm going to just take now my recipe and put this to the side after we've explained that. The instructions tell us the first thing we're going to do is grate the cheese. And you're going to be grating about 4 ounces of cheese, which makes up to about 1 cup. You can grate on a plate. Some people like to do that. I'm one who likes to grate actually on a piece of wax paper. And I do that mostly because here at school I have a collapsible grater. There is a fancy grate which is small, or there's a large grate that is going to make bigger pieces. This will take a little bit and make it look like a whole lot. This is all about just getting the cheese into smaller pieces. I'm going to choose to use that side right here. And for those of you who have grated a lot before, I'm sure that you have discovered that a grater is some type of a knife. Why do you know that? Probably because you've grated your fingertips on it, or your knuckles, or some part of you. So be careful as you work with that grater, that you are aware of your fingertips and your knuckles and such, and you keep them out of the way. I'm brushing off the back of that grater so all the cheese comes out, and then I'm just going to take this cheese and I'm going to put it back on a little plate that I had that block of cheese on to begin with. Yes, I could go ahead and leave it on this wax paper, but I have this block of cheese already, or this plate already a little bit dirty from that block of cheese. All right, I'm gonna put this over to the side because I'm gonna be coming back to that later. The next thing that we're going to be doing is we're gonna be working with the onion. The instructions tell you a half of an onion. Somehow I did my math a little bit funny and I only got you a fourth of an onion, but it'll be the same procedure with a half of an onion. The onion is of course a vegetable, and it's a fresh vegetable. If I were not going to cook this, I would want to take and get some gloves on my hands. But since here in class we're going to turn around and cook them, I'm not going to worry about that so much. The onion has an outer skin on it that I want to peel off and toss to the side. I don't want to eat that. That is just going to be garbage. This is my little garbage bowl. And now I'm going to cut this into some thin slices. The cutting board that I'm using is a green cutting board. In the food industry, there are 3 colors that you like to work with. One is yellow, one is red, and one is green. Green is for your fresh produce. Red is for your meats, and yellow is for your breads. The reason why we separate them all is because they each one have a different amount or a different type of concern that you would worry about. The red one, for sure, lots of worry when you're working with raw meats. So we like to take and save that as much as possible for our red meats. The green one, I know you think this looks like a teal. It is, it's kind of green. It's the closest one right here in my cupboard that I have, is what we're going to be cutting our vegetables on. And we'll use a French knife to do it. Not the paring knife, but the French knife. And I'm gonna cut this, you have 2 ways to cut it. One is you can cut it right here so they end up with kind of making rainbows. And the other way that you have to cook it is strips the long ways. I'm gonna do that, but I'm gonna be very careful to hold my knife correctly and cut kind of down into the roly-poly. I'm clawing my food on this end right here. My slices are about maybe a quarter, no more than a half of an inch thick. And I'm going to try to get them all to be about the same width there at the bottom slice. That is slicing my onion. I'm just going to place this up at the top of my green cutting board, and I'm going to work now with step number 3, which is to de-seed the pepper. There's maybe going to be some membranes in there. They're a little bit less desirable to have on a red pepper or green pepper, orange or yellow. They're not any lot of flavor in them, but if this were a jalapeno, this is where you're going to find all your hotness is in that membrane. Get rid of the seeds. I'm just kind of moving them off. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to slice these into strips. Notice that I'm going to be doing them about a quarter of an inch thick, and I'm kind of doing not quite the whole length just because these are kind of big pieces of pepper. And again, notice my claw. Notice the way that I'm holding this knife as we take and slice through each one of these pieces to get it to be about a fourth of an inch thick. All right, the next step is to take, it says, and to work with our tortillas. Now we have 2 choices of tortillas. We have one where you have pre-made, pre-cooked tortillas, which are what is right here. And the other one is some tortillas that are just dough, and you can cook them yourself. To be honest with you, I like the ones that you cook your very self. They are great. But this one right here is having the instructions have us use some pre-made tortillas. I'm just going to take a piece of foil about twice as big and then some as the tortillas. And then I'm going to put them inside, and I'm going to try to get rid of as much air as I possibly can. This is called a drugstore wrap. I'm going to take the foil and roll it up as tight and airtight as I can. Then I'm going to do kind of like a present, and I'm going to roll that up, and then I'm going to go this side right here, and I'm going to roll it up. Now you noticed I haven't preheated my oven. I'm just going to throw it in, turn on the timer, turn on the heat, and then I'm going to let it be in there for about 10 minutes. I don't even like 15. But what this is doing is it's softening up the fat that's found inside of this tortilla so that the tortilla is not quite as stiff. It's more flexible and bendy so that when I put my meat into it, my mixtures into it, it just wants to encompass and embrace those. It was that kind of goofy. Embrace the food to hold it in nice and tight. I could without the foil, put this in the microwave as well, but I'd have to do that at the very end. And I've just found that if I pop these in the foil right here, right now, put them in, by the time they've cooked for that 10 to 15 minutes, I'm done with everything else and I'm ready to pull them out. So behind your back, I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the oven. And again, I'm putting it in a cold oven, 350. I'm turning it on right now. Hear me pop that in there, 350. And in our class, the person who takes and starts the oven or puts it in the oven is the person that turns the timer on, all right? So I don't want them to be in there any longer than that. So now we're ready to move along to step number 5, which is to cut the chicken in bite-sized pieces. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and warm up my pan. I don't want it to sit there for too long, so I didn't start with it. But now that I'm just a step ahead of going on to step number 6, which is to saute in the frying pan, I'm gonna go ahead and warm that up. So I'm working with meat, so now I'm going to take my red cutting board. I've got a fork right here, and I'm gonna reach inside of here with the fork, and I'm going to pull this out, and I'm gonna put it on my cutting board. I'm gonna place my plate into my sink or elsewhere. I want you to zip up this marinade and make sure it's airtight before you throw it into the garbage can. This could have bacteria in it. It could have salmonella. And I do not want to get it on anything that accidentally, so I'm gonna seal it up. There are some people who like to use this marinade on their meat after it's cooked. Not a good idea, unless you have made up the marinade, reserved some, which means you took some out and put it in a little container to the side before you put that raw meat in there. Does this chicken have salmonella in it? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. So right now I'll just go ahead and pop this in the garbage can, and I'm not gonna use it for anything else. And I'm back here to the chicken. At this point, you might want to take and put some gloves on. Do you have to? No, but if you do, then it saves you from getting all those meat juices all over you. So I'll go ahead, pop these gloves on, and I'm going to look at my piece of chicken. And the first thing I'm gonna try to do is pull off any pieces of fat that might be on it. The fat is white, and I can use my French knife. Oh, there's a piece of fat right there that just fell off. It's a little bit more white color. You don't have to spend a lot of time with it, but nobody wants to take and get a big piece of fat. This right here has some fat on it. I'm cutting that one off too. Okay, this becomes garbage, and we're good to go. All right, this says to cut it into bite-sized pieces. And what I'd like you to do is take and just cut this in 1/4 inch slices. All right, if this meat were frozen just ever so slightly, we'd actually find out that it's a whole lot easier to cook than it is right now. This chicken is a little bit wiggly jiggly, not too much, but if it's frozen just slightly, not hard as a rock, but if it's just slightly frozen, then it ends up being a whole lot easier to cut. I'm gonna cut this all the way. Depending on how many people in your group, you might have 2 pieces of chicken, or the sizes of the chicken. That will affect how much we end up taking and having in your bag. All right, cutting those just into small strips all the way down. Again, that's kind of what I'm looking at. All right, I want them to be the same size so they cook at the same time. I'm going to put my French knife behind me in the sink. I'm gonna pull off my gloves, and then I'm gonna wash my hands real quick for 20 seconds. You guys remember that. Not only are we worried about salmonella, but we're also worried about E. coli. We just are always on the conservative side. We're always on the side that says, let's play it safe. And then, after you wash them for 20 seconds, then you'll come back and hopefully your pan is hot. We don't ever want to put food into a cold pan. We always heat it up. And one way I can tell it's hot is I can run my hand here over the top of the surface, and I can feel that it's kind of warm. But how hot, how warm is warm? I could put my hand in there, and if it super fried my flesh, I would know for sure it's hot. But I'm going to do the water test. I'm going to get a little bit of water on my hands, and then I'm going to flick it into the pan. And if the pan is hot, my water will sizzle and disappear. So let's go ahead and do the water test. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to put the water in there. Can you see it sizzling? Sizzling right away. It is passing the hot test or the heat test. Now you can get it too hot, so you want to make sure that you're always there, and don't let this sit for 10 or 15 minutes. I've got about 1 tablespoon of oil in here. I'm going to put half of it in. All right, I'm just going to put about half of it in, eyeball it, that's about a half a tablespoon, and now I'm going to saute. Now saute, run this oil across the bottom of the pan. Saute means to cook in a little bit of oil in a frying pan. And you're cooking it until it is what's called tender crisp. Here's the thing, the word saute is French, and it means jump. And if we had little tiny pieces of onion in here, as they're frying, you would actually see those little tiny pieces do a little bit of a jump. So since our pieces are bigger, we might not see that happen, but they are still going to be a little bit of wiggly, wiggly, wiggly as they cook. This sauteing should take just a touch of time. Don't lose patience. We're looking for a couple things to happen. The first thing that happens is you're going to see a color change. The red of my red pepper, if it's possible, is going to become a little more vibrant, a little bit more intense. Oh, did you hear that? It's going to, if it were green, I would see the green become a little more green, the orange become a little more orange. It's going to affect the color. It's obviously going to affect the texture. I'm going to have something that starts out with crispy crunchy with these onions and these peppers, and I'm going to turn it into something very soft with a little bit, just a little bit of texture still to it. It's called tender crisp. Can you remember that? You cook your vegetables to a tender crisp stage. The last thing that it affects is the flavor. The flavor becomes more mild, it becomes more mellow. If you are an onion lover and you eat a lot of onions, you know this. There are some of you even in here who say, oh, I can't stand onions, because you don't like the biting crisp of it all. But cooked onions, like when you get them in onion rings or maybe hidden inside of casseroles, it becomes actually kind of a sweet flavor. So lots of things are going to be happening. This color on the onions is going to make my onions go from being white to a little bit of see-through. And they're also going to be limp. Now right now you can see from these middle onions right here, they're still holding their shape. So I know I'm not even done yet. I'm just going to gently be stirring these all around. If I put this on too high of a temperature, then I'm going to find that the outsides are going to turn like a dark, crispy bleh. They're going to be overcooked, and they still might be crunchy. So your go-to temperature is always medium until it tells you otherwise. What does it say on your instructions? What temperature are you cooking it to? Do you notice it doesn't say? So you assume that you're going to go with a medium. You're going to cook those until the texture, oh, look at this one wiggle. Can you see that? Oh, it wants to jump. Okay, it got itself. Oh, it's wanting to wiggle. We're just going to stir these around, and slowly we're going to see the texture of those onions slightly change. You're going to see them. I just love this, guys. They're wiggling. Ah, they're alive. Isn't that so cool? That's all about sauteing. I'm going to just sit here and stir this around. Now you can check your onions a couple of ways to see if they're done. The first way is, if you're brave, you can go in there and pick one up, and if it wiggles a little bit like a noodle, and I say that like a spaghetti noodle, if it's kind of wiggly, then you know you're done. The second way you can check things is if you're working with the peppers, because they won't ever turn wiggly like a noodle. You can take a fork and pierce it into the vegetables And if you can feel them go easily through it, then you're done. If they are not going easily through it, then you're gonna cook it just a little touch longer. I think I'm gonna go by look, and I'm also seeing, can you see how these guys are starting to lay down flat? Oh, look at them move, aren't those so fun? It's like they've come alive, they've come alive. Who's gonna jump now? Again, this is sauteed. Little bit of oil in a frying pan until they are tender and crisp. All right? So as I take these guys right here, I'm just gonna, let's grab this one right here. Can you see that I'm wiggling that? It's just like wiggly jiggly. And that, my dear friends, is a nice saute. So step number 6 says at the end of here that we're gonna remove these with our tongs. You can remove them with your tongs, or my friends, you can just use your turner that you've already got in your hands. I'm gonna put a piece of paper toweling on a plate, and then I'm gonna just put those onto the plate, and any excess oil, I'm gonna let absorb into the paper towel. I'm gonna keep these guys warm by just putting another plate on the top of it. If you leave them sitting out, they're gonna, of course, cool down real quick. Now I'm gonna take the next half of my oil, last half of my oil, and I'm going to now do number 7. I'm gonna have, this pan is hot, give it half a second for that oil. That's all it'll take for you to get your pan up to heat. And then I'm going to grab my whole cutting board, and I'm gonna put this in here. Now students, if you put too much meat in here, you're gonna be boiling it rather than pan frying it, or sauteing, which is another word. And I'm just gonna kind of, with my turner, I'm gonna spread all of this stuff around. And I don't want my chicken to get dark brown at all. I just want it barely light brown. Because I have thin cuts, it's gonna happen pretty fast. And I'm just gonna cook it till there is no pink. I could get a meat thermometer and insert them into these guys right here, but I don't need to. I can look for the no pink. Flip these guys over, get them turned so that they cook quickly on both sides. And as soon as there is no pink around, we're gonna check one of the fattest ones, cut it open, and see if inside there's any pink. If you're cooking them until they're dark brown, you are overcooking this food. The proteins are very sensitive to heat, and if you're not careful, they become tough, chewy, and dry. Think of that, tough, chewy, and dry. Maybe you've had a piece of chicken, or maybe a piece of any meat, and you've started to eat on it, and you chew, 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 and then you have to, with all your might, get a little bit of, this is kind of gross, spit up so you can swallow it down. That food has been overcooked. You can overcook chicken, you can overcook, and it's dry. I hate overcooked chicken. It's dry. You can overcook beef, you can overcook pork, you can overcook eggs. All of those are high protein foods. Too high of a temperature, cooking them too long is not good. Now I'm seeing right now that there's quite a bit of moisture that's coming out of my meat. That's not fat, that's just some moisture from the cells of the muscle inside of this meat. And I'm gonna give it just a half a stitch. I'm gonna see it come out, and then it's gonna kind of recede, and that will be a marker that I'm probably pretty much done. All right, just kind of keep those all on an even plane. Again, I don't want to put too much chicken in here all at once, because too much moisture will come out, and this moisture that you see right now will end up boiling our meat rather than pan frying it. All right, while that's happening, I'm just going to move my cutting boards away, get them out of the space, and then I'm going to grab a plate and place it right here, because we, my friends, are right at the very end. I'm about ready to hear my timer go off on my tortillas. I have about seconds, and they're just about done. Give me just one more second. We'll check the chicken and make sure that it is cooked on the inside. I'm going to grab a fork right here. Maybe I'm gonna go get a table knife. I'm gonna grab a knife. I'm hesitant to use a paring knife because you can cut through nonstick finishes. You can see that moisture starting to settle down. You can also see I don't have any browning that's happening here. And I think this piece right here might be my very thickest. So I'm gonna grab my fork and my knife and I'm gonna cut into the center of this. And when I look in there, if I see any of that raw pink, which I don't, let me see if I can pick this up. Whoa. Watch me drop it. If I can see any pink, I'm gonna still keep cooking. But since I can't, I'm done. I've sauteed my vegetables. I've cooked my chicken all the way through. You could maybe go right from the pan into your tortilla. We're gonna go ahead and pull this off and place that on my paper toweling. I'm gonna turn off my heat and then I'm gonna assemble my tortilla. Hey, FYI, with this, before you go ahead and put it into your sink full of soapy water, because it's greasy in there, take a plain paper towel, wipe this out, get as much grease out so you don't get your cooking water wet. And then you could go ahead and put it in. Okay, all right, my tortillas are over here. I'm gonna grab them. Believe it or not, my oven hasn't even come to temperature and I don't care. All right, just a second, these guys are complaining. I'm gonna open this up. The foil will cool down right quick. You can see I'm handling it. It's warm, but it's not hot at all. It's not hot. All right, open this up. A little bit of burst of steam might come out. And now my tortillas are all just like material. They're so nice and flexible. And my instructions tell me that each one of you gets to assemble what you want, put your own fajita together. Fajitas traditionally are mostly just the meat and the veggies. You don't want to do a whole lot of anything, any one thing, because then it will fill it all up and you won't be able to roll it up. Fajitas usually have a smaller tortilla that they work with. They're maybe this big, but we're using a larger tortilla and we're gonna make it even kind of taco-y. We're gonna have options. Again, you're gonna put on what you'd like with salsa. If you'd like a little bit of sour cream on yours, that's cool. If you had some guacamole, that might be added to it well. I'm gonna grab some cheese in there. And now my last thing says is that I'm going to fold it burrito style. Burrito style folds in the end so that you don't have your tortilla or your fajita all unrolling. So I'm gonna just fold this in like such. I'm gonna pop this up and over the top, and then I'm gonna tuck this edge in so that it doesn't come unrolling. And then you can see these ends right here are all kind of tucked in so I can eat it and it's not gonna fall out on the floor. That, my dear friends, is fajitas, a fast and easy and affordable, but slightly dangerous because we're working with raw meat, dish that each one of you can prepare at home. I hope you enjoy making it and we'll see ya. Bye-bye.